Now we're going to move on, folks. I'm going next, and I'm going to tell you why the plan not to prosecute eco-extremists is totally barmy. Start the clock. Folks, the kimono-clad Julian Maugham, famous now as not just a KC, but the guy that clobbered a fox to death wearing his wife's kimono. He's a liberal left lawyer, and he has said in The Guardian that he's found 100 virtue-signalling lefty lawyers that are actually going to refuse to prosecute the climate extremists blocking Britain's roads. You've seen them out there, blocking ambulances getting from A to B. To me, it's a damn disgrace. And the only reason that Julian and his mates want to do this is because they know that if they put it to you, the British people, you would overwhelmingly tell them where they could shove their kale-clad green extreme views. And ultimately, why these lawyers are saying we will refuse to prosecute these extremists is because they know they can't win at the ballot box. To me, folks, they say the science, they wax lyrical about how the science is actually behind them, when no scientist is as hysterical as these people like Greta Thunberg, who, by the way, 5 years ago tweeted out a now deleted tweet about how the world may end because of our use of fossil fuels in 5 years. Actually, fossil fuels are the reason that the cost of living is up, that your food shop is up, that the cost of filling up your car is up. We've got to get back to basics. We must continue to bang up these liberal lefties.
Ties up, Darren!
Right, how are you then, Benjamin? What have you got to say about that?
I mean, you know, I interviewed actually, and it's similar to this, about these protesters. First of all, I think they are here to save the world, OK? Oh. The fact is that you can't...
No, you're here to save the world, Benjamin.
That's true. I am the people's prince. But, you know, the fact is that we have had many of the hottest years ever recorded have been in the last 10 or 20 years. That is a fact. There are parts of the world, Bangladesh, for example, which had more of its country go underwater than ever before and saw millions, tens of millions of people seriously displaced.
Benjamin,
those are consequences of climate change that we should listen to these activists about.
Barristers not prosecuting eco-activists causing misery to the British people going to do to solve any of the serious problems that you just highlighted? Diddly squat, that's what. They're virtue signalling, and that's it.
Sorry, Diddly Squat is a great farm, and that's the only one I'm going to think about. The truth is that when these activists go out, they get us talking. That's why it works.
No,
if you prosecute them, we won't have that protest.
And I mean, ultimately, right, it is fossil fuels that have allowed us to actually cope with weather-related disasters. Weather-related deaths are down year on year because we're actually in a position to use technology to advance human flourishing. I think that's a beautiful thing.
That's a great point. And the reason why we're able to explore all of this technology is precisely because of fossil fuels. And people mention Bangladesh.
Renewables.
Yeah, well,
they're cheaper than fossil fuels at the moment.
Yeah, but fossil fuels are the reason why we have all of this technology. It's the reason why we can keep our food fresher for longer. It's the reason why we can have hot baths. It's the reason why we can be technologically advanced. And that is something that a lot of people forget. And when we talk about Bangladesh and Pakistan, are we actually going to talk about the reason why these floods affect so many people? And it's because they don't have the proper infrastructure that can actually stop them from being so affected. It's not just about climate change. And I think that's...
Yeah, we should be concentrating on mitigation. But I think the fundamental point about this, beyond climate change, whether you think it's real, whether you think it's a crisis, whether you think it's an emergency, the issue is whether you think lawyers should be taking political stances and denying to take on a case simply because they don't agree with the person who needs defending. I mean, it is absolutely ludicrous. And not prosecuting people on the basis of politics, that is not good for the rule of law, is it?
Do you worry about that, Benjamin? Actually, this plan would actually reduce confidence and faith. We've already seen the Metropolitan Police trust in that is at an all-time low. If the British people don't reckon that actually the police and the judiciary are going to deal with those who are breaking the law by preventing ambulances getting from A to B and all the rest of it, working people from getting to and from work, that actually what you're going to do is damage trust even further.
Well, look, working people won't be getting to work when half of the country's underwater.
That's what these
activists are talking about. But let me answer your question directly. Look, legal representation for everybody, regardless of accusation, is integral to a functional democracy. So whether you are accused of being a child murderer or a paedophile or the other most heinous crimes that can happen, they still obviously deserve legal representation because that's essential to justice. But I think the question about something like climate disaster and these eco-protesters isn't in the same category as that kind of essential behaviour.
Really?
They're still going to get representation. I am sure that there are more than enough people who are barristers, who are lawyers, who will represent them. These people are just taking a stand to say that the law should probably be different.
But why are they doing it? They're obviously trying to virtue signal. They're obviously trying to pressurise other lawyers who have to accept these kind of cases to make money. I mean, that is their business, that is their job. It just seems utterly pointless and quite self-indulgent, actually.
Well, absolutely, and the only reason that these people actually fling themselves on Britain's roads is because they can actually afford to take the penalty in most cases, right? These people are kale-munching, lefty metropolitan liberals
I am here.
that are actually making...
To be fair, Darren, I like a bit of kale.
Well, I don't. I think it's disgusting. If that's the diet that you people want us to actually live on, right, we might as well go back to caves, Benjamin. We'll be crawling around this studio in a loincloth.
I mean, frankly,
at the rate at which we're going. Well, it might appeal to some viewers.
As a millennial, I think a cave is probably the only thing I can afford to buy in this country at the moment. But look, you want to stereotype these people as being out of touch. The truth is that it's the lowest paid and the most insecure in this country, and indeed the world. You mentioned Pakistan and Bangladesh earlier, who will be victims of climate change.
Let's go back to the Extinction Rebellion protests when there were protesters, middle-class protesters predominantly, who were blocking the tubes from going with working-class people.
Also, though, Benjamin, if you care about the world's poor, you would be the loudest champion for fossil fuels and the use of them. That's what's lifted people from literally crawling around in their own filth
in their loincloths,
or dying at childbirth.
I think, we need things like wind farms across the country. We need things like solar panels.
What do we do when the wind stops blowing?
We live on an island, Darren. There's plenty of wind. There's enough coming out of your mouth.
From you, yes,
But even with regards to the current cost of living crisis and how that's had a knock-on effect on energy bills, the wind farm companies haven't actually allowed consumers to reap the benefits of these so-called lower cost of renewables.
Well, maybe we need more protests.
Renewables have actually been more expensive at a retail price.
We still pay the same, yes, across the board.
I think ultimately, at the end of the day, what we need is a proper energy independent strategy. Some of that's going to come from nuclear, some of that's going to come from renewables and also fossil fuels.
Albie, we'll leave it there.